Shavua Tov, Gute Woch. I'm going to tell story number 17 of the Shivchei Shem Tov. The name of the story in Hebrew is Maaseh B'Muchsan She'asu Lo Kishuf. It's the story of a Jewish tax collector that was victim of a magic spell. What was it? Let's see the story. Once there was a Jewish tax collector, one of the jobs that the Jews of the region did back in those days, and he lived in a small town, and he came to the Baal Shem Tov because he was victim of a black magic, black spell done on him. What was it? Every night, half of some of his possession will disappear, will become half by the next day, whether it was his coins or drinks or things that he had in the storage room. Half of it would disappear over the night. Not that somebody was coming in the house to steal it, it was in a place and suddenly, magically, half of it would disappear. So he comes and tells the Baal Shem Tov what happened, and the Baal Shem Tov told his sofer, his scribe, I presume is Rav Alexander Shochet, of whom we spoke about a couple of weeks ago, and he asked him to write down these shmirot, special, what today we call kmeot, amulets, in which, in a parchment, the sofer writes combinations of the name of Hashem, combined with names of angels, whatever, to guard a person from the influences of these klippos, of these impure castes. And they are placed in every room on top of the door. It's a Kabbalistic custom that the Baal Shem mastered. And once they are written, the Baal Shem Tov went with the Muhsan, with the Jewish tax collector, to his place, to his house, and came into the house and placed them in a pile, the Shmirot, on a pile on the table. And then the Baal Shem Tov left, went to the marketplace. The children of the house see suddenly this zaviruche, this stormy wind twirling around the house, going from one place to another, everywhere, until suddenly he found a small opening and disappeared from everywhere and left. The Baal Shem Tov is coming out of his out of the market, rather, coming back to the place where he was lodging, probably across the street from the house of the Jewish tax collector, and he sees the image of a gigantic Cossack standing next to the house, next to the place where he had just left the house, on the courtyard. So the Baal Shem Tov walks toward the courtyard of the tax collector's house, and the closer he comes, the smaller this image of the Cossack becomes, until the Baal Shem Tov arrives to the place where the Cossack was. Is completely gone. The klippa, the impurity, is completely gone. The Baal Shem Tov placed a shmira in that place. And then he goes into the house, placed the shmirot everywhere, and he turned the beds over in every room. Turns them over, turns things around, looks everywhere, goes to the storage room of the house and looks among the barrels. It reminds me like the when the fire department comes to a house after there was a fire, and they inspect the whole house to make sure that that there is no tiny little bit of fire left anywhere in the house, because a tiny spark would start a fire again. And so he makes sure that this klippa is really completely gone. Of course, puts the shmirot all over the house, and then he left. A non-Jewish woman comes. She's the wife of the town's miller, and she is crying out loud. She addresses the Jewish tax collector and tells him in Russian. So in the book says, in the language of Russia, Ya mudra alete modreshe, which means, I am smart, but you outsmart me. Because this spirit, this ghost, came to my house after he left yours, and he killed the two bugs. What? The story finishes there. I usually put explanations in my Patreon, link in the description, but since the story is short and it really requires some kind of an explanation, in the Yiddish version of the Shivchei of Shem Tov, published like a year after the Shivchei was published originally in Hebrew in 1814, that edition was supervised by the son of the author of the original manuscript, Rav Dov Berov Linitz. So it's a trustworthy source. It explains the story a little better, and it says that the Mechashev, the sorcerer who cast the spell on the Jewish tax collector, was the town's miller. Now you see the connection, and I would assume that he's upset because the tax collector is taking, part of his property away. He's taxing him out. So he does a spell that would make the tax collector lose part of his own property in revenge. And probably the advice to do so came from his wife, the miller's wife. So she thought, I have the perfect revenge. You take our property, we'll make your property, become half. But then she was outsmarted because the tax collector went to the Baal Shem Tov and got the spirit away. Furthermore, the two bugs, according to this, are her children. Kansi makes you want to hate this woman. She calls that way her own children, insects. The spirit went upset, kicked him out of the house, so he went to take revenge on the miller's children. The language of the words of the woman, Ya Mudra Alete Mudraishe, as well as the name of this whirlwind Confucian spirit that was all over the house, is not Russian, even though the book says it's Russian. I spoke to people who speak Russian as first language. It's not Ukrainian either. Is the local provincial dialect of Polish. The Baal Shem Tov lived in Podolia, a region today in western Ukraine, but at the time it was part of the greater kingdom of Poland and Lithuania, and the language spoken in the region, even today, by the peasants, is a dialect of Polish. So that's the explanation to the story and kind of puts it together. I am on the work of translating this old source of this first source of Baal Shem Tov story, the first ever published, translated into Spanish, as well as telling it here in English and Spanish in YouTube every Motzei Shabbat. So those who wish to contribute can come to my Patreon, link in the description. Money goes to, for my efforts in doing this, as well as the translation, edition, and publishing of the stories in Spanish. The first, as far as I know, the first time it will ever have been done. Shavua Tov, Agutevach. I'm wishing you all to be inscribed and sealed for a good and sweet new year. Come back next week. Shavua Tov, Agutevach.